Hello, War of Word users. I'm Govinda Dasu, and I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Mark Breda, who's an expert in physics, on resolve the death penalty be abolished federally.
Yes.
So first of all, A or nay, Dr. Breda?
I say yes, the death penalty ought to be abolished, and I think there's a lot of reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to go into that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, first and foremost, I feel that as a society, when you, as a society, make a decision to execute a criminal, that the blood for that criminal is on the hands of every member of that society. That is to say, it is essentially an act of
Society.
murder by the state. And I feel that no matter how heinous the crime was that was committed, that there's no justification for having the state essentially have retribution against that person. Now, I think that justice involves, in my opinion, justice involves a rehabilitation as well as certainly removal from society. That is to say, if you are a person who has, murdered people or, done other heinous crimes, I don't think that you should. I think that you have revoked your privilege to be out among the rest of the members of your society, but I don't feel that that your life should be forfeit.
Now, does your opinion apply to just U.S. citizens, because the resolution says federally, or does it apply to anyone who the United States decides to deal with?
I mean, as of right now, and I mean, I don't have the exact statistics off the top of my head, but there are very few countries in the world that still have a death penalty on the
Well, I
books.
mean the U.S. executing someone who's not a U.S. citizen, like Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel, now, I mean, I understand, okay, so, I mean, there's definitely a certain gray area, and when you're talking about acts of war, I do feel that a sovereign state has the right to defend itself, and one could argue that although we never actually declared war on any state.
We
right?
declared war on terror.
We declared war on terror, which is a very, very
and
sort
he's
of
a
nebulous
terrorist,
thing.
right?
Right, and he's a terrorist. So one might argue that that's a justifiable, that was a justifiable act.
So it's okay to dehumanize the enemy in that case.
Well, I mean, I'm personally not in favor of hunting down and executing members of Al-Qaeda. I personally believe that members of Al-Qaeda or other terrorist organizations should be hunted down and brought to justice in front of either U.S. Criminal courts or the International Criminal Court. I don't believe that they ought to be just hunted down and executed. So for me, and I know that it's a rather extreme position, but even for Osama bin Laden, I don't necessarily think that his execution was something that was right. I don't think that that's really something that the U.S. Should have done. Because even though he was clearly the mastermind of this terrorist plot, right, or at least certainly took credit for that, the U.S. is not really at war against him, and there's no real way that you can, I mean, if you have this nebulous sort of, war on terror, right, it's very, very reminiscent of what's going on in, for example, in 1984, right, in George Orwell's 1984, where there's this very nebulous enemy that's always out there, that's always, and you're always able to justify kind of, horrific acts because, terrorists might strike later on. And I feel that our society needs to figure out a way to combat terror through the same kinds of justice system that the citizens of the U.S. have come to appreciate. Because if you are dehumanizing people from another part of the world in order to support your citizens at home, you're belittling the justice system in that country. Because what you're basically saying is that we have a double standard for justice. It's okay for the members of our society to be held to this high standard of justice, but other people outside of our society, we're not going to hold that same standard to. So I think it's actually important for us as a society to have the same standards of justice throughout our dealing with criminals, whether they are terrorists or otherwise.
And so, I don't know, at Guantanamo Bay they do a lot of torture, but do they execute criminals there too?
To the best of my knowledge, they do not. I don't know for certain that that's the case, but I don't know that they do. But even the torture that they do is in violation of international standards, right?
And if you were, like, say, president, or if you were someone who was in charge of that, or could suggest or sign legislation that would get rid of it, you would?
I would absolutely sign legislation to end torture, yes.
And do you think that the death penalty is something that should be abolished by the federal government?
Well,
because the resolution's about
yeah,
federal.
I understand the resolution is about federal government, and I mean, I don't. So first of all, I'm not totally clear exactly what the law of the land is right now.
Now, I think the states decide.
I understand that there are state levels, but there are also federal criminal courts, and I don't know that if the death penalty is applied in federal criminal court or not. But I feel that first of all, I feel that it should be the same law throughout the United States, that if somebody commits a particular crime in California, that they should expect to have the same treatment as if they committed that crime in Texas.
But doesn't that go against the Ninth Amendment that says that states have rights to decide on certain things?
It depends on, obviously it depends on your definition of what you think states' rights, where do you think those states' rights begin and end, right? So, there's since the 1980s, there's been a constant push to the right for, giving more and more and more leeway
because of Reagan
to the states, right? Exactly. So the Reagan administration pushed back on states' rights to say that, look, the federal government shouldn't be deciding these things, states should be deciding these things. And nowadays you have groups like those run by Grover Norquist who are suggesting that, well, really, the federal government shouldn't even really exist, that we should just defund the federal government. It shouldn't do anything other than have a military and, perhaps some other very minimal functionality, and that everything should be decided by the states.
Like what the founding fathers intended for it, which might not be applicable to today, right?
I think it's really difficult to say for certain that the founding fathers intended for states to be individual fiefdoms.
So in the end, if you were President Obama sitting in the Oval Office and you had to sign a piece of legislation saying that you would federally abolish the death penalty, would you do that?
I would absolutely do that. I would definitely sign that legislation.
Thank you, Dr. Breda.
All right, thank you, Govi.